Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. There's a quiet moment before transformation begins, the kind where the world hasn't yet shifted, but you can feel something stirring beneath the surface. Imagine sitting in a dimly lit room at 3 a.m., the hum of a city still awake beyond the window. There's a notebook open, half filled with dreams and questions that don't yet have answers. That's where Tim Ferriss begins. Not with noise, but with curiosity, with the relentless question. What do the most extraordinary people on Earth actually do differently? Tim Ferriss, the man behind the 4-hour work week, the 4-hour body, and the 4-hour chef, has long been obsessed with performance, not in the sterile sense of productivity hacks, but in the lived art of designing a life worth living. In Tools of Titans, he doesn't lecture, he listens. He distills the rituals, philosophies, failures, and mental models of hundreds of world-class performers, from billionaires to monks, from Navy SEALs to comedians, and translates them into something human. Something you and I can hold on to when the nights get long and uncertain. He calls this collection a compass, not a map, because there is no single route to greatness. But there are patterns. There are tools, mindsets, and habits that reappear again and again, like stars in the same constellation. And so, he gathered them over years of intimate interviews from his podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show, and created something that feels less like a book and more like a manual for the soul of mastery. Tim divides this journey into 3 realms: healthy, wealthy, and wise, echoing Benjamin Franklin's timeless triad. But these aren't separate worlds. They're intertwined. Health fuels clarity. Wealth gives you freedom. Wisdom gives you direction. Together, they form the anatomy of a fulfilled life. Let's begin with health, because everything starts with the body. Tim doesn't romanticize discipline. He studies it, breaks it down, and reassembles it into something practical. He begins with the rituals of people like strength coach Pavel Tsatsouline, who popularized the concept of grease the groove, the idea that strength isn't built through exhaustion but through consistency. Do fewer reps, more often. Don't destroy the muscle, teach it. This principle extends far beyond fitness. It's the rhythm of mastery itself. A little progress, repeated daily, compounds into something extraordinary. Then comes the voice of Wim Hof the Iceman, who teaches the power of the breath. Hof's life is a living paradox. By plunging himself into freezing water, he discovered warmth, the heat of control, the clarity of surrender. Through breath and cold exposure, he shows that our bodies are not fragile machines, but adaptive miracles. When fear rises, breathe deeper. When life freezes you in place, remember, your lungs are keys. There's a quiet echo here that the body is not separate from the mind. Kelly Starrett, the movement coach, reminds us that mobility is freedom, not vanity. If you want to be creative, to be sharp, to endure long hours of deep work, you need a body that can hold that focus. Movement is meditation in motion. And then there's meditation itself. Nearly every Titan Tim interviewed, from entrepreneurs like Mark Andreessen to artists like Rick Rubin, has some form of stillness practice. Whether it's transcendental meditation, journaling, or simple breathing, silence is the forge where clarity is shaped. One morning ritual that appears again and again is gratitude. Simple, yet profound. Tim himself writes down 3 things each morning that he's grateful for, not grand things, but small details. The way the light falls on the table, the smell of coffee, the breath before speaking. Gratitude rewires the brain to see abundance, not lack. And when you start your day from that place, every challenge feels different. Another pattern emerges: fasting. Many of the world's top performers experiment with fasting not as deprivation, but as discipline. It sharpens the mind, strengthens decision-making, and connects us to an ancient rhythm to be hungry, literally and metaphorically. Then comes the theme of sleep, the quiet foundation. Neuroscientist Dr. Peter Attia and writer Naval Ravikant both stress that optimization starts with recovery. You can't out-hustle exhaustion. you can only outrest it. Sleep in their eyes isn't laziness, it's leverage. But perhaps the most transformative idea in this section comes from endurance athlete Amelia Boone. She once said, "You can't be brave if you're not scared." Her story reminds us that resilience is not born from strength alone, but from the willingness to stay in the discomfort, to befriend it, to walk through it, to keep moving even when everything in you wants to stop. And that's where health transitions into wealth. Not the kind that glitters, but the kind that endures. Tim Ferriss views money as a tool for freedom, not accumulation. His conversations with people like Chris Sacca, investor and billionaire, reveal that true wealth is built on asymmetric bets, small actions with massive potential upside. It's about learning to recognize leverage in time, in relationships, in technology. Chris Sacca talks about the power of being different. Most people play it safe, conforming to the invisible scripts society hands them. But Titans question those scripts. They write new ones. They look for ideas that sound crazy at first because crazy is often just early. Another voice, that of investor Naval Ravikant, deepens this idea. Naval believes wealth creation isn't a zero-sum game. In the age of the internet, you can create value for millions and be rewarded accordingly. He repeats a simple truth. Earn with your mind, not your time. To do that, you must build assets that work for you while you sleep ideas, code, media, systems. Wealth, in Naval's view, is not about money, it's about freedom from compulsion. It's the ability to say no. Tim captures another pattern among his guests. They all obsess over learning. They invest time in reading, in testing, in reflection. They think in experiments. Billionaires and monks alike ask the same question. What if I'm wrong? That humility is their edge. Then there's the art of negotiation and decision-making. Derek Sivers, the musician turned entrepreneur, offers a deceptively simple rule. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. That principle becomes a compass for clarity. You don't need more time, you need fewer distractions disguised as opportunities. And for those chasing success, Tony Robbins reminds us that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. Money amplifies who you are. It doesn't change you. If you're miserable and get rich, you'll be a richer version of misery. The book moves like a river, blending voices, crossing boundaries, each insight carving its own path, yet all converging toward wisdom. When Tim shifts toward wisdom, the tone deepens. This is the realm of inner mastery, the battlefield of mind and meaning. Here, he turns to people like Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL commander whose mantra, "Discipline equals freedom," has become legendary. Jocko wakes at 4:30 every morning, not out of obsession, but liberation. Every time you choose structure over chaos, you reclaim a piece of your power. And then there's Brené Brown, who teaches the courage of vulnerability. Power, she reminds us, is not in perfection but presence in the willingness to show up as we are, to risk being seen. Tim himself reveals that he struggled for years with depression. Behind the image of relentless optimization, there was quiet darkness. He speaks of how Stoic philosophy, especially the writings of Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, became his lifeline. Stoicism, he explains, isn't cold detachment. It's emotional alchemy. It's learning to control what you can and release what you can't. There's a technique he often repeats: fear setting. Unlike goal setting, fear setting is the art of naming your fears, writing them down, visualizing the worst-case scenario, and realizing that even the worst is survivable. Once fear is written, it loses its power. He also speaks about the importance of mentors and of virtual mentors. You don't need to know your heroes personally. You can study their minds through their words, their routines, their failures. At this point, the narration softens. It feels like sitting across from a mentor late at night, realizing that greatness isn't reserved for the chosen few. It's built through small intentional acts repeated over years. And somewhere here, the only time I will say this, I remember reading this book during a winter of uncertainty when everything seemed to be falling apart. I had no grand plan, no roadmap, but one line stayed with me. The superheroes you have in your mind, those are nearly all walking flaws who've maximized one or two strengths. That sentence broke me open. It made me realize you don't have to fix everything before you begin. You just have to begin. Tim's world is filled with reminders like this that courage isn't loud, that mastery isn't glamorous, and that the small, consistent choices you make, how you spend your morning, how you speak to yourself, those are the tools that shape your destiny. As the night deepens and the noise of the world fades, the second current of tools of Titans flows the wisdom of the mind, the spirit, and the quiet work that shapes a life worth living. This section of the journey, though woven from hundreds of conversations, feels like one continuous heartbeat. It's about mindset, the invisible architecture of success. Tim often says that all the Titans he interviewed share one thing: they ask better questions. Questions that shape identity, reframe fear, and turn obstacles into fuel. He learned that your life's quality depends on the quality of questions you ask yourself. When things fall apart, some ask, why me? The Titans ask, what is this teaching me? One of those Titans is Tony Robbins, a man who built an empire on transformation. Robbins believes that emotion is the ultimate resource. Strategy matters, yes, but energy is what drives execution. His principle is simple. Motion creates emotion. Move your body, and your mind will follow. He speaks about the state-story strategy triad, the idea that you must first change your state, your physiology, then your story. The narrative you tell yourself, and only then your strategy, the actions you take. Tim sees this pattern echoed across disciplines. Athletes, entrepreneurs, monks, all of them master their state before they master their craft. They breathe, they visualize, they move, because no amount of intellect can save you from a body that feels defeated. Then there's Jamie Foxx, whose story is a masterclass in versatility. Actor, comedian, musician, Oscar winner, and yet his power lies not in talent alone, but in adaptability. He learned from his grandmother that preparation is love, that excellence is respect in motion. Jamie once told Tim, "What's on the other side of fear? Nothing." It's a line that burns. It means fear is an illusion sustained by avoidance. The moment you face it, it evaporates. That's the heart of the Stoic philosophy that runs through this book. Seneca's words echo through Tim's reflections. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Every high performer knows this. The pain of anticipation is worse than the pain of doing. So, they act quickly, consistently. Tim's conversation with investor and PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel captures this perfectly. Thiel asks one question that cuts through complacency. If you have a 10-year plan, why can't you do it in 6 months? It's not about reckless speed. It's about collapsing false timelines. Most limits are self-imposed illusions. And then comes another kind of wisdom, one rooted in simplicity and surrender. Tara Brach, the meditation teacher, speaks of radical acceptance, the idea that healing begins when we stop fighting reality. She invites us to whisper to ourselves, this too belongs. Whether it's grief, anxiety, or self-doubt, it belongs. That phrase, Tim says, changed how he saw himself. Throughout Tools of Titans, patterns emerge like a quiet code. Titans are not fearless. They are practiced in fear. They are not endlessly motivated. They are disciplined in low motivation. They are not superhuman. They are strategically human. This truth deepens when Tim explores creativity, the territory where chaos meets structure. Rick Rubin, the legendary music producer, believes that creativity is not about adding more, but about listening deeper. He describes it as tuning a radio to a frequency that's always been there. The artist's job is to get quiet enough to hear it. That same stillness appears in the words of writer Paulo Coelho, who once said, "When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it." Many of Tim's guests live this paradox. They hustle relentlessly, yet they trust the timing. They move with intention, yet they let go of control. And then there's the practice of journaling, one of Tim's personal anchors. He describes it not as a diary, but as therapy on paper, a tool for thinking. Many of his guests share this ritual: morning pages, gratitude lists, questions of reflection. Casey Neistat, the filmmaker, writes before filming. Arnold Schwarzenegger visualizes his day before stepping into the gym. Even the Stoic Marcus Aurelius journaled nightly to discipline his mind. The lesson is clear. Writing is not about record-keeping. It's about awareness. Tim also dives into the world of biohacking, where technology meets self-experimentation. He interviews scientists, athletes, and thinkers who treat the body like a lab. They test sleep patterns, nutrition, supplementation, fasting, temperature, and light. But beneath the gadgets lies a deeper philosophy: self-awareness through experimentation. To know what works for you, you must be curious enough to test it and humble enough to adjust. Amidst all this optimization, one voice breaks through like a melody. Naval Ravikant again, this time speaking of peace. Naval says, "A fit body, a calm mind, a house full of love, these things cannot be bought. They must be earned." That line becomes one of the book's emotional anchors. You hear it again and again, a mantra whispered between chapters. Naval believes happiness is not a goal, but a skill. It's something you train like a muscle. He talks about the compounding of calm. Just as wealth compounds through interest, peace compounds through stillness. Each time you choose patience over anger, presence over distraction, gratitude over envy, you are investing in your future peace. Tim connects this to the Stoic principle of voluntary discomfort, doing hard things by choice to grow resilient. Taking cold showers, fasting, saying no. Each small act of deliberate discomfort expands your capacity for joy. But there's another kind of courage, the courage to rest. Maria Popova, the creator of The Marginalian, teaches that rest is not idleness, it is incubation. She calls it the pause that makes the music. Every creator, every thinker, every titan she knows builds time for solitude, because reflection is not a luxury, it's fuel. Tim also explores relationships, the invisible foundation beneath every great life. Many of his guests, from Reid Hoffman to Esther Perel, agree on this. Success without connection is emptiness. Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, describes relationships as long-term emotional capital. You don't network, you nurture. The people you grow with are your truest assets. And then there's the art of asking. Amanda Palmer reminds us that vulnerability, the courage to ask for help, is one of the most radical acts of trust. Asking, she says, is not begging. It's inviting connection. At this point in the book, Tim pauses. The rhythm slows. He reflects on the idea of enough. Many of his guests, millionaires, founders, creators, say the same thing. The goal isn't more. It's freedom. Freedom from needing approval. Freedom from chasing. Freedom from the endless loop of comparison. You, who are listening right now, maybe you felt that too. The exhaustion of always running toward the next milestone, the next version of enough. Tim's reminder here is gentle. You can't win a game that has no finish line. So, he offers a question worth keeping close. If this were the only day you had, what would make it enough? That question becomes a compass for everything that follows. Later, as Tim explores the topic of learning, he returns to a core truth that mastery is pattern recognition. Josh Waitzkin, the chess prodigy who inspired Searching for Bobby Fischer, explains that growth comes from stress and recovery. Too little stress, you stagnate. Too much, you break. The secret is rhythm push. Pause, reflect, grow. Josh calls it the soft zone, the ability to stay calm amid chaos. It's what separates good from great. In the middle of turbulence, the master slows down time. Tim calls this practical philosophy. It's not theory, it's lived wisdom, tools you can use when life presses hard. One of those tools is visualization. Olympic athletes use it. Entrepreneurs, soldiers, musicians, they all imagine success in detail, but more importantly, they imagine failure. They practice recovering from mistakes before they happen. That's what builds composure. And again, the pattern returns: discipline equals freedom. Clarity equals power. Stillness equals strength. These are not slogans. They are anchors, truths that the titans live by, again and again, in different forms. And so, the river continues slow, powerful, deliberate, carrying us deeper into the final movement of Tools of Titans. By now, you begin to sense what Tim Ferriss discovered. That greatness is not one grand leap, but a mosaic of small, conscious choices. Choices that, when repeated with intention, build a life that feels whole. In the last arc of this journey, the stories turn inward toward meaning, mortality, and mastery of the self. Tim begins to ask harder questions. What truly matters once success has been achieved? What remains when all the noise fades and you're left alone with your own reflection? Many of his guests, from legendary athletes to spiritual teachers, return to the same truth. Mastery without peace is just another form of prison. Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired, says something that resonates like a whisper in the dark. Don't be the best. Be the only. It's not about outpacing others. It's about finding the one thing you can offer that no one else can. Uniqueness over competition. Depth over speed. Tim notices that many of the Titans aren't obsessed with success anymore, they're obsessed with meaning. They wake up not to prove, but to serve. And that service often begins with humility. There's a story he tells from Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress. Matt says that in every project he takes on, he assumes he's wrong first. That assumption creates space for learning. It's not self-doubt, it's strategic openness. And it's what allows him to adapt, to listen, to keep evolving long after others plateau. The same principle echoes in the words of Seth Godin. Seth speaks of the practice to the act of showing up every day to create, not because you're guaranteed success, but because creating is who you are. The practice, he says, isn't about outcomes. It's about identity. This becomes one of the book's quiet revolutions, that habits are not just systems for productivity, they are rituals of becoming. When Tim reflects on his interviews with athletes like Laird Hamilton and Kelly Slater, he sees another dimension of mastery: play. They remind him that flow is found not through force, but curiosity. The best surfers aren't fighting the wave, they're dancing with it. And that's what life becomes when you stop clinging a dance with uncertainty. In one conversation with B.J. Miller, a palliative care physician, Tim faces the reality of death not as something distant, but as a mirror for how to live. B.J., who lost 3 limbs in a near-fatal accident, speaks with serene conviction. Don't wait. Don't wait to love, to forgive, to create. He teaches that awareness of death is not morbid. It's clarifying. It strips away the trivial. This becomes the emotional heartbeat of the book. Memento mori. Remember you will die, and let that remembrance sharpen your aliveness. Tim pairs this reflection with his own personal practices. He speaks of morning silence, of journaling about mortality, of asking one grounding question. If I died tomorrow, would I be proud of how I spent today? Somewhere in these pages, you feel the subtle shift, the transformation of optimization into wisdom. The Titans, despite their achievements, are seekers. They aren't chasing perfection. They're searching for peace. There's a recurring mantra here. Be useful. Be kind. It's simple, almost childlike, yet beneath it lies the essence of legacy. Tim recalls lessons from Sam Harris, who reminds us that mindfulness isn't escape, it's intimacy with the moment. That each breath, each thought, each gesture is an opportunity to wake up to life. Then comes the voice of meditation teacher Jack Kornfield, who says, "The trouble is, you think you have time." That line pierces through ambition. It turns urgency into grace. You can almost feel Tim pausing as he writes, his tone softening, because this book, despite its talk of hacks and habits, is really about presence, about the art of noticing your life while you still have it. And it's here that Tim reveals one of his most important insights. The greatest investment is attention. Whatever you give it to grows. If you feed your fear, it expands. If you feed your craft, it flourishes. If you feed your gratitude, it transforms the ordinary into sacred. This truth echoes in the voices of countless guests, from musicians to monks, from CEOs to soldiers. Each has discovered that the mind, when trained, becomes the most powerful tool of all. It's not that the Titans have no darkness. They do. They've all faced failure, heartbreak, depression, loss. But what separates them is how they meet that darkness, not with resistance, but with awareness. They use it. They learn from it. They alchemize it. That's what Tim calls spiritual jujitsu, using the weight of your challenges to gain balance, not lose it. At the midpoint of this final act, there's a moment of stillness. Tim admits that despite everything he's learned, he still struggles. He still doubts. He still fights against the noise. But then he shares what's become his lifeline, the practice of returning. Returning to breath. Returning to gratitude. Returning to the moment. It's not about never falling. It's about never forgetting you can stand up again. He invites us, you, me, everyone listening, to consider that maybe the point isn't to master life, but to meet it fully. To hold joy and pain in the same breath. To see progress not as a finish line, but as a rhythm. Because life, as the Titans have shown him, is not about constant victory. It's about constant awareness. You, who are listening right now, maybe you've tried everything. The morning routines, the affirmations, the endless search for improvement. And maybe you're tired. Maybe what you really need isn't another system, but permission. Permission to rest. Permission to be. Permission to start again, not because you're broken, but because you're growing. Tim Ferriss ends Tools of Titans with a kind of quiet gratitude, not for the success he's achieved, but for the wisdom of the people who shared their stories. He says the book is not meant to be read once, but lived through. Pick a page, try one thing, and see what happens. He believes transformation doesn't begin with a grand leap. It begins with a small act of courage, one push-up, one journal entry, one honest conversation. And perhaps that's the deepest truth this book reveals, that greatness isn't about being extraordinary. It's about being intentional. So as we reach the end of this journey, imagine this: a sunrise breaking over a quiet sea. Each wave, a choice. Each ray, a reminder. The world doesn't demand perfection from you. It asks only that you show up awake, alive, and willing to try again. Let that be your starting point. Let it be enough. And as the light grows, remember the mantras that have carried us through this river of wisdom. Discipline equals freedom. A fit body, a calm mind, a house full of love. Be useful, be kind. These are the tools. You are the Titan. If this journey has stirred something in you, if you found even one sentence that lingers, I invite you to share it. Share your insight, your reflection, your own story. Like, comment, subscribe, and let your words ripple outward, because your story might just become someone else's compass. The seed has been planted. The sunrise is yours to walk into.